What's the most out-of-touch thing you heard from rich people? While working for a valet parking service in the Santa Barbara area years ago, a woman hired us for a jewelry showing she was having at her giant house in Montecito, and while we were waiting for guests to arrive, my boss informed me that when the guests get in their cars to leave, that I needed to be sure to close their car doors or else they would just drive off with their doors open, just because they're so used to people closing their doors for them. Story 2. I needed a bicycle to get to a new job. Found someone online selling a really nice bike for cheap, so got in touch. Took 2 trains to their house to buy the bike, and when I got there, it was a mansion. The bike was in a garage full of supercars and classics. They asked me where my truck was to load the bike on, and when I told them I was riding the bike home, they laughed. And before I knew it, everyone in the house had been called to the garage to hear how I was riding the bike 3 hours home in the dark. No one offered me a lift. They just acted blessed at how they didn't have to do such things. Well, that's not just out of touch, that's just mean. They easily could have offered you. I'm sure they didn't have anything more important going on. But on the other hand, a nice bike for cheap. So, give and take, I guess. Story 3. I've told this before, but my boss was trying to stop me from taking 1 or 2 days off at a time because their accountant was complaining about the extra work or whatever. I explained I was using the days to take a Saturday and Sunday off here and there to visit my family for birthdays or whatever. She responded, "Wouldn't you rather take a whole week off so you can fly somewhere warm?" I just stared at her and said, "I make minimum wage. How am I supposed to pay for that?" She had no answer. Story 4. I was talking to the owner of the building my old work/clinic was in. He was taking his wife back to Germany on vacation for the 3rd or 4th time that year. I mentioned how jealous I was. He told me that the only way I was going to go was just to do it. He said that too many people wait for the right timing and don't just take themselves traveling. I was making $55,000 a year at the time, the single earner for a family of 3 with a toddler. Rent was about 40% of my income. Story 5. Back when I was in my early 20s, my beat-up old car broke down in my job's parking lot when I was about to drive home. I was getting paid $10 an hour as a pastry chef at a catering company. This was barely enough to cover rent. I was obviously pretty distraught over my car dying. My boss, company owner, ended up saying to me, "Why are you so upset? It's just a car. Buy another one." I couldn't even respond. I just looked at him like he was crazy. Story 6. I had a boss once who was almost zealous about the need for everyone to be at work whenever a snowstorm hit. He kind of saw it as the key battle in a war over productivity. I had to pull him aside after he told an intern working half-time for basically minimum wage that she should simply buy a car that can get through the snow so she can be at work in any weather event. Said it in front of the entire staff and looked like a moron for doing so. Once you accumulate some wealth, not even a lot, just enough to push the wolf away from the door for good, you just don't think about things like, what if my car broke down tomorrow? Life's day-to-day problems just kind of become less consequential, and you can focus your energy elsewhere. Problem? Oh, make it go away with a little money. Most people are extraordinarily myopic. That's how they would deal with the problem. Why shouldn't that work for everyone else? Story 7. My boss at the time made between 5 to 10 times more than I did. We were talking about big purchases like a car or a house, and he says something along the lines of, "Well, you'll get a great deal since you're an all-cash purchaser." I just kind of smile and nod, knowing that on my salary that he was aware of, I wasn't even an all-cash purchaser of groceries. Story 9. I work for a startup based out of San Francisco. I'm a remote employee halfway across the country and am therefore a sort of second-class citizen. My direct peers who work in San Francisco make at least double what I do, and they almost all had extremely privileged upbringings. They went to top 10 business schools, they summer in Tahoe, that kind of thing. I was in the home office a few months ago for our annual kickoff meeting, and one of the speakers pulled the room. "Has anyone here worked for Amazon?" Nobody raised their hand. "Wow, I'm surprised." I said, "Does warehouse count?" And the entire room erupted in laughter. For certain, I'd just told a very enjoyable joke. Story 10. Used to travel for a glamping company, Glamour Camping, where we would set up huge canvas tents for fancy weddings and parties. We woke up real early one morning to a bunch of calls from some rich LA socialite about how the tents were wet. No other explanation. We rushed over and it turns out she has no idea about the concept of condensation in the morning. I can't control nature. Sorry, lady, you're not getting your deposit back. Story 11. Rishi Sunak, British Prime Minister, is stinking rich and grew up in a pretty affluent affluent family. He went to a leading private school, Winchester, and Oxford. Doing the interview rounds in the current election campaign, he was pressed by an interviewer about whether his family had to ever give anything up. After much umming and ahhing, the only thing he could come up with was Sky TV, a British satellite TV service. He was lampooned for days about that one. Story 12. The, I want to say 12 or 13-year-old son of one of my clients expressed confusion to me when I asked them where I could get more paper towels from when they ran out in the washroom of his parents' however many million-dollar yacht. He said something like, "It's always there, what do you mean?" He was so disconnected from the process of, I guess, cleaning and restocking that he just thought that stuff would always be there and never run out. The look of genuine confusion on his face was something else. That's not the first time I experienced that either. Talking to the kids of extremely wealthy people is always a trip. Ah yes, he would make the most terrifying type of adult. And there may come a moment where he's cut off from his parents for whatever reason. Maybe they think he needs to grow up, and he'll just know nothing. And for the record, that's as much, if not more, the responsibility of the parents as it is his own. He can only know so much with the way he was raised, you know? Some things you actually have to learn. Story 13. There was a guy who recently gave all his money away and lived on the streets to prove that anyone could earn millions. Then his father died and left him millions. He then stopped living on the streets and claimed to have proved his point. Story 14. I was a live-in super of a building in Boston. The building was 43 units, 40 were college kids, and one year a young girl moved in next to me, and 3 months later her electricity was shut off. She started pounding on my door demanding that I turn her electricity back on. I checked her circuit breakers and they were fine. Went into her apartment and immediately noticed the pile of electric company mail on her table, with big red letters and all that saying, "Last warning." I say, "You didn't tell the electric company that you were the new tenant." "What difference does that make? Why do they need to know it's me?" "They need to send you a bill for electricity usage." "Now I know you're messing with me. You don't pay for electricity." She moved out 2 days later of embarrassment, her parents having to pay for breaking the lease. She couldn't look at me for those 2 days. Story 15. At a high-end kids' clothes resale store called Once Upon a Child. The store only buys Nike, Adidas, or other well-known brand-name kids' clothes, and only kids' clothes. Everything must be new or barely worn or they won't buy it. Usually when you bring in a bunch of stuff for them to buy, they'll only buy 10% of what you bring in. I once saw them say no to a beautiful custom-made dress that an Indian couple had spent $300 on for their only child daughter. The reason was, it wasn't a brand name. So, at that store, some mom was selling a bunch of clothes and finding out what the store was taking and for how much. Her 8-year-old had wandered off into the store and came back with something she wanted to buy. Mom said, "No, sweetie, we don't shop here. We only come here so poor people have nice things to buy." Story 16. I've known quite a few people to not realize the benefit they received by just getting a house, car, and cost of a degree, sometimes including advanced, from their parents. Much easier to budget when those items are removed from the equation, even more so when you can get some income from the house. Story 17. Rich friend. Just take Friday off work and fly out to visit me this weekend. I know it's last minute, but I'm sure there's seats available. I don't think I can make it this weekend. Oh yeah, I looked and saw it was only coach available. Don't be embarrassed. I don't blame you for not wanting to sit next to them. Does this guy truly think this way? I just earn average money. Story 18. I occasionally drove minibuses for a private school in the UK. Have overheard some very privileged conversations from the students, but one sticks out. A tutor on the bus asked a student what he says when other students make comments about the very expensive watches he wears to school, to which he said his response is, "My dad has the same 24 hours as your dad." He then proceeded to go on about how his dad inherited a massive entertainment chain and various hugely successful companies from his grandfather. Story 19. Company event where people with investment properties told us that you need to just save hard to get that deposit. Just don't go out to dinner with your spouse as much, or just go to the pub every other Friday. Yeah. So reducing restaurant dinners from 0 to 0, and the pub tab from 0 to 0. No, still broke. My colleague left the Zoom midway through. If it was in person, he would have broken the door on the way out, or came across the conference table at them. Story 20. I'm a type 1 diabetic and medical costs are insane without insurance. This happened in 2012 when the ACA bill was going through Congress. My boss was against it and I told him how getting on insurance would help me. He grimaced and said, "That is your responsibility. You should get a job." I worked for him and he made sure to not provide benefits for the employees. Story 21. My friend has a charity and these wealthy folks took him out to dinner to talk about the work he does. When it came down to making a donation of any amount, they were hesitant on whether to give. The bill for dinner, though, came to the table and it was like $1,500. They dropped their Amex card on it like it was no big deal. Story 22. Doctor told me to work with my personal trainer to figure out a routine that wouldn't make my chronic autoimmune disorder worse. I asked if he was going to cover the cost of a personal trainer out of his own pocket, because insurance sure as crap won't cover it, and I've never been able to hold a job in my entire adult life because of said chronic autoimmune disorder. Dude was shocked poor people exist and one was in his office. Story 23. I was talking to a very rich lady we had just videotaped. She was a board of director at one of the largest oil companies on the planet. She told me she used to summer in Prague. I told her I used to summer in school. I thought it was a damn funny line, but it didn't even register to her. She was just confused on how that had anything to do with what she said. Story 24. Owner of the company I used to work for was a car guy. His daily driver was a giant, fully kitted out Chevy Tahoe that he rarely drove more than just himself in, and he also owned a Ferrari or one or two Mercedes and a Jag, I think. Specific models, I don't know. I just know they were pricey. One day after I'd worked there for a couple of years, he came into our office in NorCal and tossed me the fob to his Tahoe. He said, "I need you to drive this down to Paso Robles." Our office is on the Central Coast, about a 5-hour drive where he's based out of. When I asked how I would get home, he said he would make sure I would get taken care of. When I asked how he would get back home, he said, "My Ferrari that I'm picking up from the shop." Later that day, I asked him to show me where his windshield wiper controls were since rain was expected during my drive. He said it's all automatic, and when I asked how it works, he goes, "How old is your car?" A very nice guy that gave out generous bonuses every year, but pretty out of touch with us normies. Story 25. When we met in our friend group, the rich friend showed us his expensive new winter jacket for €500 plus. And from time to time he goes on a shopping haul with his rich dad where he spends $1,000 to $2,000. One time we confronted him about his bragging and asked him if he didn't think that his spending for clothes is quite a lot. His answer, "Well, I know some people who spend more and I know some people who spend less, so I think I'm average." Statistics 101. Story 26. My sister is a therapist, and she used to make incredible money at this bougie therapy practice that only accepted customers who weren't using insurance in a very wealthy neighborhood in our city. Her specialty was troubled teens. Almost universally, her clients were children of parents who drop them off and be like, "Fix them." And when she would review with the parents what needed to change at home, they'd be like, "I don't understand. I'm paying you to fix this." It legitimately doesn't compute when they encounter a problem that money won't fix. Story 27. I did some medical volunteer work in Haiti post-earthquake. Stayed on a Christian missionary compound because the clinic I worked at was supported by the mission. At dinner, I was talking about the bathroom at the clinic, basically an outhouse, and how instead of toilet paper, there was a bucket with torn-up book pages. The only reaction I got was a gasp, followed by, "I cannot believe they treat books that way." I was speechless. Like, if that's what you took away from that, I cannot help you. Story 28. My sister's ex was born into a rich family and was so out of touch, it was unreal. He was the poster child for spoiled white bro. He was racist, homophobic, misogynistic, and downright rude. His parents found him a fancy job making very good money, so he immediately threw it in my face that I'm lazy and stupid for not finding better jobs. I have a disability, and it's incredibly difficult to work. He told me, "If you don't like the job market in this country, leave." Easy for a rich, spoiled brat to say when mommy and daddy's money can pay for your cruises around the world while I'm struggling to find my next meal. I'm glad my sister dumped his idiot self. Narrator's commentary. The people who don't even try to be self-aware or compassionate blow my mind. Like, I fully recognize I could be wrong about this, but I really want to believe that their life feels empty in some aspect, you know? I want to believe they can't really be happy being like that, right? Even if I know that's maybe not all the truth. Story 29. I wouldn't consider this out of touch, but I was definitely amazed. Several years ago, I worked at a retail store that sold a lot of different items. I was on the cash one Friday afternoon when 3 young women, early 20s, walked in decked out in luxury brands. They bought a suitcase and several other random items that totaled almost $400. Once I announced the total price, one of them pulled out 4 Benjamins like she was pulling out issues and handed them to me without looking. I asked if they were going on a trip. One of them answered, "No, we got sick of carrying our stuff." I mean, hey, I get tired carrying stuff too, but damn, to buy a whole suitcase and more just because they were tired is crazy to see. Story 30. During a dinner party, we started talking about our experiences in high school. I mentioned the diversity of my large 6A school, and that almost half the student population was on free or reduced to lunch. A woman who had grown up privileged in the San Francisco area absolutely burst out laughing and thought I was joking. She said, "Free or reduced to lunch? Why? What? They couldn't afford food?" It got real quiet and real awkward when I explained, yeah, that's it. She had only attended private school, kindergarten through grad. Story 31. I used to teach at a very expensive private school. This school went all the way through from kindergarten to high school. I had to give some students who were about 9 years old a ride in my car one time. A spoiled set of twins in particular couldn't understand why my car was so old and, quote, poor looking. Adults are apparently supposed to have new expensive cars.
My dad is an adult and he drives a Rolls Royce. He gets a car every year. You should get a new car too. Why don't you buy a new car?
When I tried to explain that I was still in my first year of teaching and had only just finished uni last year and didn't have money yet, the response was simply,
"But our dad always had new cars, even when he was at university."
On another occasion, one of them smashed her brand new iPhone on purpose to prove to other students her dad would buy her a new one. I really hope that last child did not get a new phone, right? Tell me she didn't OP, please. Also, I'm sorry to whip out the horrendous child voice for the last story of the day, but anyway, that's the last one. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.